Okay, so let's dive right into this absolutely shocking story. We're going to the heart of what was, at the time, the most powerful empire in 17th century Europe. And it's this incredible tale of power, of obsession, and a curse that wasn't supernatural. It was chillingly, horrifyingly man-made. Just try to picture this for a second. You're an ambassador, you've traveled all this way to the Spanish court. You're expecting to meet this larger-than-life figure, a symbol of an empire where the sun literally never set. But instead, you see this. And this wasn't some secret whispered in the hallways. It was the shocking, visible reality of the king for everyone to see.
You know, his own subjects had a name for him, El Hechizado, which means the Bewitched One. They were convinced his grotesque deformities and his fragile mind had to be the work of witchcraft, or maybe even demonic possession. But the truth? The truth was so much more terrifying than any supernatural story. The real monster in this tale was his own family.
Right. So this is him, King Charles II of Spain. He was the end of the line, the final, tragic result of a dynasty whose obsession with power sent it spiraling down a very dark path of self-destruction. His life story is, well, it's a medical and historical catastrophe all rolled into one. So what was the real curse that plagued poor Charles? Well, it wasn't demons, not even close. It was the Habsburg dynasty's morbid, centuries-long obsession with keeping their bloodline pure. And the way they went about it was the very thing that ended up destroying them. For generations, this was the absolute, ironclad rule. We're talking uncles marrying their nieces and first cousins marrying their first cousins, over and over again. This strategy just systematically wiped out any fresh blood from the royal line, basically turning their family tree into a tangled, inescapable genetic trap.
Okay, let's look at the hard evidence. We can actually see how this whole strategy was, in reality, a biological time bomb just waiting to go off. Thanks to modern science, we can now put a number on the damage that the Habsburgs willfully inflicted upon themselves generation after generation.
This number, it's just staggering. This is Charles II's inbreeding coefficient, which modern geneticists calculated at 0.254. What that means is that more than a quarter of his genes were identical from both his mother's side and his father's side. That reveals a level of genetic isolation that is just shocking.
But here's where it gets truly mind-boggling. His level of inbreeding was actually higher than that of a child born to a brother and a sister. And this wasn't from just one single taboo union, no. This was the horrifying result of 11 consecutive generations of them.
So, his family tree? It wasn't a tree at all. It was more like a twisted spiderweb where the same people just kept showing up in multiple roles. I mean, get this. The woman who was his great-grandmother was also his aunt and his grandmother. It was this mind-bending genetic knot that was just getting tighter and tighter with every generation.
And this relentless inbreeding had a crazy effect on his ancestry. I mean, think about your own family tree for a second. A normal person, you or me, has 16 great-great-grandparents. Charles II? He had only 10. Okay, now go back one more generation, where you'd normally have 32 ancestors. Charles had only 6. His family tree wasn't just tangled, it was literally collapsing in on itself.
So now that we've seen the genetic cause, let's really look at the devastating human cost. We need to try and understand the day-to-day reality for the man at the very center of this genetic catastrophe, a king who is trapped inside a body that was failing him in pretty much every way imaginable. You know, every normal milestone that a child hits was like an almost insurmountable mountain for the young prince. While other kids his age were running around and playing, Charles was struggling with the most basic functions of life. It was a constant, painful reminder of his condition.
His body and his mind were just a collection of medical disasters. That Habsburg jaw was just the most visible problem. He was short, he was frail, his spine was so curved he looked permanently hunched over, and mentally, he was plagued by these violent mood swings, like a toddler, which made rational thought, let alone governing an empire, completely impossible.
And what makes this all so much more tragic is that Charles himself, he seemed to know what was wrong with him. In these rare moments of clarity, he'd express this profound frustration, this feeling of being trapped inside a body that wouldn't listen to him, ruling an empire he couldn't possibly understand. So this deeply personal tragedy very quickly spiraled into a full-blown political catastrophe. Charles's condition wasn't just his own private hell. It was threatening to tear Europe apart as all the other great powers started circling like vultures, just waiting for the inevitable collapse. Here was the biggest problem. The king was functionally impotent. His reproductive organs were described by doctors at the time as infantile. This created a massive succession crisis that terrified every single court in Europe, because with no heir, a massive continent-spanning war over the Spanish throne wasn't just possible, it was guaranteed.
The court, just completely unable to face the biological reality of what was going on, started resorting to more and more desperate measures. First, naturally, they blamed Charles's young wife, putting her through all sorts of humiliating treatments, and when medicine failed, they turned to a much more dramatic and frankly terrifying solution: exorcism. This led to these bizarre and really disturbing public spectacles. You'd have priests in the throne room itself, trying to physically wrestle imaginary demons from the king's convulsing body. He was forced to drink these awful concoctions and watch as his own belongings were burned to drive out evil spirits. And all the while, his physical health just got worse and worse. So in the end, the dynasty's fanatical war against genetic diversity, their pursuit of purity and power, led them straight to their own biological and political collapse. The final verdict wasn't handed down by some rival king or a foreign army. It was delivered by nature itself. When he finally died, nature rendered its judgment. His autopsy report is honestly the stuff of nightmares. It describes a body just ravaged from the inside out. It was the final proof, written right there in his very flesh, of the devastating cost of his family's pride.
And here is the ultimate irony of it all. The most genetically pure Habsburg was also the most powerless. All those centuries of careful, obsessive, in-family breeding produced a king who couldn't properly speak, couldn't eat, couldn't roll, and couldn't produce an heir. The absolute opposite of everything a king was supposed to be.
The story of Charles II really serves as this permanent cautionary tale. His twisted features are a reminder that no amount of power or wealth or royal ambition can overcome the fundamental laws of nature. Because in the end, biology always, always wins.